Walt Whitman, one of America's most influential and celebrated poets, is often hailed as the father of free verse and a pioneering figure in American literature. His work profoundly shaped the poetic landscape of the United States and left an indelible mark on modern poetry worldwide. Born in the early 19th century, Whitman's life and career spanned an era of great social, political, and cultural transformation in America. His poetry reflected his deep engagement with the democratic spirit of the nation, his belief in individual freedom, and his passion for the human experience. Early life and background. Walter Whitman was born on May 31, 1819, in West Hills, Long Island, New York. He was the second of 9 children in a working-class family. His father, Walter Whitman Sr., was a carpenter and farmer, and his mother, Louisa Van Velser Whitman, was a homemaker. The family moved several times during Walt's youth, eventually settling in Brooklyn, which was then a growing urban area. Whitman's upbringing was modest but rich in exposure to the natural world and the vibrant cultural milieu of early 19th century America. Whitman had limited formal education, attending public schools only sporadically. He was largely self-taught, voraciously reading a wide array of books, including classics, contemporary literature, newspapers, and encyclopedias. This autodidactic streak would characterize much of his intellectual life. Early on, Whitman demonstrated a keen interest in writing and journalism, working as an apprentice printer and later as a schoolteacher and journalist in various small towns. Career beginnings and literary development. In his early adulthood, Whitman pursued a career in journalism and editing. He worked for numerous newspapers and magazines in New York, Brooklyn, and later in Washington, D.C. He also wrote short stories, essays, and political commentary. This journalistic experience sharpened his command of language and his engagement with social issues, including abolitionism, labor rights, and democracy. Whitman's literary breakthrough came with the publication of his seminal work, Leaves of Grass, in 1855. This collection of poetry was radically different from the formal, structured verse that dominated the era. Whitman's poems were expansive, free-flowing, and infused with an exuberant celebration of the self, nature, the body, and the soul. The first edition of Leaves of Grass contained just 12 poems, but it was revolutionary in tone and content. Whitman wrote in the preface about his desire to capture the American bard's spirit and to create a poetry that reflected the vast, diverse, and democratic spirit of the country. Themes and style. Whitman's poetry broke with tradition in many ways. He abandoned rhyme and meter in favor of free verse, a style that mimicked the rhythms of natural speech. His language was plain, direct, and often conversational, making his poetry accessible and immediate. Thematically, Whitman celebrated the individual, democracy, equality, and the interconnectedness of all people and things. He saw the human body and the natural world as sacred and celebrated sensuality and physicality without shame. Whitman's work also reflected his profound optimism and belief in the possibility of human progress. He was a staunch advocate for the abolition of slavery and an early supporter of the rights of women and minorities. His poetry often emphasized inclusiveness, unity, and the idea that every individual was part of a larger whole. The Civil War and its impact. The outbreak of the American Civil War in 1861 deeply affected Whitman and his poetry. Though he did not serve as a soldier, Whitman volunteered as a nurse in Army hospitals in Washington, D.C. His time caring for wounded soldiers exposed him to the brutal realities of war, suffering, and death. This experience deepened the emotional and spiritual dimensions of his work. Poems written during and after the war, such as Drum Taps and When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloom mourned the loss of life while also celebrating sacrifice and renewal. Whitman's empathy and close observation of the wounded soldiers helped to humanize the conflict in his poetry. His work during this period expanded the themes of love, loss, patriotism, and healing, further establishing him as a voice for the American people during a time of crisis. Later life and legacy. After the Civil War, Whitman continued to revise and expand Leaves of Grass, which grew into a monumental work with multiple editions throughout his lifetime. His later years were marked by relative seclusion and ill health. In 1873, Whitman suffered a stroke that left him partially paralyzed. Despite this setback, he continued to write and edit his work. Whitman spent his final years living in Camden, New Jersey, where he had moved to live with his brother. He died there on March 26, 1892, at the age of 72. Though his work was initially controversial and not universally accepted by his contemporaries, Whitman's reputation grew steadily after his death. By the 20th century, he was widely recognized as one of the greatest American poets. Influence and importance. Walt Whitman's influence on literature and culture cannot be overstated. His pioneering use of free verse opened the door for future generations of poets to explore new forms and expressions. His themes of democracy, inclusiveness, and the sanctity of the individual resonated beyond poetry, inspiring movements in civil rights, feminism, and modernist art. Whitman's celebration of the body and sensuality also challenged Victorian-era prudery and censorship, making him a controversial figure but also a liberating voice. His poetry continues to be studied for its innovative style, profound themes, and bold vision. Conclusion. Walt Whitman was a poet who embodied the spirit of 19th-century America, its expansion, its turmoil, and its idealism. From humble beginnings, he became a revolutionary literary figure whose work celebrated life in all its complexity and contradictions. His legacy endures not only in the canon of American poetry but also in the broader cultural consciousness as a symbol of freedom, democracy, and human dignity.